Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year, and welcome back to another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. As always, I am Blake Smith, and with me are my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt and Mr. Ryan Roberts. How are y'all
Hi.
doing?
Happy New
Hey.
Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to y'all.
How was y'all's New Year? Good?
Good. A little sore,
Child.
but I'm good.
Little sore. We heard Ryan fell down a mountain. He's okay.
Yeah,
He's with
a
us
little
though.
Become a Patreon member if you want to know what he was really doing.
Ryan, you shouldn't be doing that whenever
Boy.
you're on the mountain. It's okay.
Boy. Wicked you are, Ryan. Wicked you are.
Well, I'm super excited to not only be following up Christmas with a true crime, but starting off the new year with a true crime episode, because we are back for the second part of the Black Dahlia. Because last week we jumped headfirst into that. That was fun. Merry Christmas to everybody on that. And tonight we're going to be delving further into the mystery of it and some of the corruption and darkness behind it, and all the crap where you're like, really, assholes.
Ooh, the sordid world of LA. I'm so excited.
Oh yeah, we're about to delve deep into it. So, well, let me give a quick disclaimer for these episodes, because these are some pretty graphic ones. This podcast episode is going to discuss the unsettling case of the Black Dahlia, which includes sensitive and disturbing content such as sexual assault, murder, mutilation, suicide, graphic descriptions, and abortions. Detailed descriptions of violent acts and their aftermath will be explored, and this episode may not be suitable for all audiences, and viewer, listener, and parental guidance is advised. I always love that we throw in parental guidance even though we're 18 and up, because we know some of yous let your kids watch this.
You dirty heathens.
So what do y'all say? You're on mute, Shelley.
I said I'm all for it.
Okay. So what do y'all say? Y'all ready to jump into this dark corruption that's happening?
Let's do it, man.
All right, awesome. Well, in our previous episode, the body of Elizabeth Short, known to the world as the Black Dahlia, was discovered on January 15th, 1947, in a vacant lot on Norton Avenue in Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California. Her body was brutally mutilated, bisected above the waist, and displayed on a public thoroughfare to be found. Evidence at the crime scene pointed to the fact that Elizabeth had been tied up, tortured, murdered, and cut in two, but the body had been drained of blood and scrubbed of fingerprints. After proper identification, Elizabeth's life story unfolded, and a clearer picture was painted for her nomadic lifestyle. A woman who had a love for servicemen, the movies, and money, spent the mid to late 1940s bouncing from east to west coast before her untimely demise. Investigators quickly pieced together her movements, and from witness testimony, they were able to gather that in Elizabeth's final days, she had become frightened and paranoid of an unknown person or persons. Escaping to San Diego, where nobody knew her, she quickly returned to Los Angeles with Robert Red Manley, who was the last acquaintance to see her alive at 6:30 p.m. on January the 9th, 1947. However, testimony from a bellhop and doorman placed Elizabeth's last known location at 10 p.m., walking out the Biltmore Hotel onto Olive Street and heading south in Los Angeles. What Elizabeth didn't know is what kind of world she was stepping into and what trouble awaited for her as she passed through these doors. Now, we have some key players from the previous episode that I would like to remind everybody of, and that is going to be obviously Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, the 22-year-old victim. You are also going to have Detective Harry Hansen, which apparently I did not get a picture of him in here, but that's okay. He is one of the officers assigned to the Black Dahlia case, along with his partner Finis Brown, who was also assigned to the Black Dahlia case. You have Captain Jack Donahoe. He is the head of the LAPD's homicide detail. Will Fowler is the reporter for the Los Angeles Examiner. Jim Richardson is the editor for the Los Angeles Examiner. Aggie Underwood, possibly one of my favorite characters in this story. She is a reporter for the Herald Express. And then you also have Red Manley, who was the last known person with Elizabeth Short.
That lady looks like the chick from what was it, Monsters Inc? Because you forgot to file your That's
You
who she
forgot
looks
to
like.
file your paperwork, Mike.
Who she looks like to
Wazowski.
me.
Mike Wazowski.
That's true. I do love her though. I
She
think that she's
does.
yeah. I'll give that to you. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Well, although Robert Manley was cleared exonerated for exonerated, the trouble for him didn't stop with his release. After the newspapers had gotten every drop of ink out of his story that they could, Red was faced with marital issues at home for stepping out on his new bride.
You don't say.
Yeah. His face had been splashed across the papers nationwide, and it ultimately cost him his marriage, his job, his sanity, and even his life. Red was plagued with guilt and jumped in and out of mental establishments before finally being placed in Patton Asylum for the Insane, where he ultimately took his own life. But with Red cleared, a slew of confessors came forward. Within the first couple of weeks into the investigation of Elizabeth's murder, more than 50 confessors confessed. Confessors confess. I love it. The same. These included habitual confessors known to police and homeless drunks. But then there were those that were so convincing that many man-hours had to be dedicated to their claims. And on top of this, the phones were ringing like crazy with false leads from, quote, witnesses that police had to track down as well. And I believe I read or heard somewhere along the lines there were well over 75 individual officers working on this case at this time. There's a lot of time being put into this investigation within the first couple of weeks, and we only covered up to about 2 weeks after the murder in the previous episode, so that's where we're picking up on this one. But by now, the police had gathered quite a bit of information regarding Elizabeth's time in Los Angeles. As an aspiring movie actress, Elizabeth Short knew of the industry she was getting herself into, but what she didn't know was just how deep the web of deceit ran in the city, nor how far back the corruption went. For that, I got to take you back just a little bit so I can build you a little bit of a foundation here. So, back in 1933, Mayor Frank Shaw was elected as mayor to Los Angeles. And he ran what most consider was one of the most corrupt administrations in the city's history. A grand jury in the late 1930s found evidence of numerous bookie joints, brothels, and illegal gambling establishments while investigating Shaw's corrupt regime. Some estimates put the total amount of locations over 2,500 within the city. And allegedly, all of this was protected by underworld payoffs to District Attorney Buren Fitts, the LAPD, and Mayor Frank Shaw. The evidence was so overwhelming that it led to the recall of Mayor Frank Shaw, the first mayor in the city of Los Angeles to take that title. Good for him, I guess. He was replaced by a reformist mayor, Mayor Fletcher Bowron. Bowron. I'm just going to go with Bowron.
Okay.
Works
It
for
also,
me.
it also resulted in the removal of Police Chief James, quote, Two Gun Davis, and cost District Attorney Fitts a re-election.
You know what we say about people with nicknames? They're mobbed up.
Say,
Exactly.
I
Oh,
wonder how he got his nickname. Can you tell me how?
you don't say. It was even alleged that DA Fitts helped cover up the murder of the ice cream blonde herself, Thelma Todd. Both police chief James Davis and District Attorney Buren Fitts had been buddies with Harry Chandler of the Chandler dynasty, who was extremely influential and powerful and was the publisher for the prominent Los Angeles Times. The Chandlers, who were conservatives, utilized the Times to voice their opinions and were the dominant voice on many social and political topics. Since the 1880s, the Chandler dynasty had owned and operated the Los Angeles Times.
Okay.
And under Harry Chandler, the dynasty wielded significant influence over the city. Many political candidates knew that the support from the Chandler dynasty, the Los Angeles Times, and Harry Chandler himself was a prerequisite if they expected to win or be appointed to office. The Times allowed the Chandler dynasty to promote the nomination of certain candidates in seeking the election of mayor, appointment to the Chamber of Commerce, or appointment as police chief, sheriff, and city commissioner. And this created a very favorable situation for Harry Chandler if and when his candidates got elected or appointed to office. And a majority of the 15 city commissioners were backed by Harry Chandler himself, and a city council majority could always override an uncooperative mayor. A person only needed 3 of the police commissioners for the majority on that board, and it would be Chandler's man, the mayor, who appointed the police commissioners. It was also the police commission who appointed the police chief, and Chief Clements B. Harrell was a Chandler choice, and he was the one to replace Mayor Bowen. Trying to build you a little timeline here. Go ahead, Ryan.
So goes the LA Times. So goes the whole municipal government.
Pretty much. If you
Gotcha.
were backed by the LA Times and the Chandler dynasty, you were going to take office. Therefore, he can put his people into place. And because it was favorable to get you office, I might need something. You know,
One of these days. Yeah.
One of these days. Yeah. Also at this time was another media mogul, William Randolph Hearst, an American businessman, newspaper publisher, and politician known for developing the nation's largest newspaper chain and media company, Hearst Communications. And I believe he is the grandfather of Patty Hearst, I believe is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, William Randolph Hearst used flamboyant methods of yellow journalism, which was sensationalizing the sensational and crude exaggeration. The Los Angeles Times, being more conservative among the metro papers, refrained from indulging in the sensationalism that characterized those Hearst papers. Furthermore, the newspaper did not prioritize conducting an extensive investigation into the murder of Elizabeth Short. That's the Los Angeles Times. During this time, in an unprecedented move, Mayor Bowen appointed an assistant police chief in Los Angeles. That appointment went to Joe Reed, an alleged Chandler choice, and Chandler key operative at the police department, reporting back to Harry Chandler as a liaison between Harry Chandler and Chief Clements Harrell. So you can kind of start to see this web that is
and this is a very tangled web.
It's a
and
very,
the spot
very
in the center is the Chandler dynasty.
Right.
Pretty much.
It's a very incestuous relationship with the press and the police.
Yes, it very much is. Well, Joe Reed remained the Chandler overseer until he resigned in a cloud of scandal in 1949. So that should tell you how well that went. Harry Chandler ends up passing away in 1944, and his son, Norman Chandler, was the heir apparent. But Norman lacked his father's tenacity and ruthless ambition that was was instead considered indulgent and a bit narcissistic.
However, I like him. Hey,
I knew you would, girl.
Look at you with that pop in your mouth.
Old and rich, she's good.
Oh, and he looks like he's a scoundrel. I like those.
And Shelly, I think he's looking right at you too.
He is. Hello, you sweet thing. Oh, he does. He has an air of dangerous about him, doesn't it? I like that. If he ain't mobbed up, I can't pick out a mobster. If he ain't mobbed up, yeah, I bet he's got a nickname.
Well, Norman took over in 1945, turning the Los Angeles Times into the ultra-capitalist voice of political interests and property holdings of the Chandlers and their entourage of influential friends. The Los Angeles Times preferred to not splash Elizabeth's murder all over the front page, but their hands were tied and they placed it on the front page one time in order to compete with the more sensational Hearst papers. The only other time that I have read in the entire history of the Black Dahlia case is that it has been on the front page one other time on the Los Angeles Times.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems like it'd be a big story. Think that'd be front page news for several days. A dismembered woman found in the middle of a residential neighborhood, exsanguinated.
Well,
wow, that seems like that might be a pretty big story.
True, but remember they're kind of prim and proper, and they, where the Hearst is more sensationalist. They don't want to have, I guess, maybe have that on
in order to compete, you
papers.
think that might be a big story.
You would think so.
Yeah.
Corruption already, I see.
Well, speaking of corruption, on the dark side of the city, there were other prominent members in Los Angeles during the 1930s and 40s, and those consisted of Jack Dragna, Johnny Rosselli, Bugsy Siegel, and Mickey Cohen.
Who are those guys?
No, I have no idea. They were the mafia bosses, liaisons for city hall payoffs, and the muscle/hitmen for the mafia ran Los Angeles areas. Now, It was no secret that by the 1940s, City Hall and the LAPD and other prominent members of Los Angeles were receiving payoffs from mafia members for police protection. Shortly before the Black Dahlia's nude body was found, the front page of the newspapers were littered with stories concerning Los Angeles gang warfare. Numerous bombings, shootings, and attempted assassinations filled the papers. One of the many businesses that was in the Rolodex of the mafia ran Los Angeles was a prostitution or call girl rings. And I tell you, I know she ain't running a good life, but this one of those influential individuals operating one of these rings from her very spacious apartment was none other than Syndicate Madam Brenda Allen. This woman fascinates me,
Oh,
by the way.
child,
Check
look
her
at
out.
her. She's fancy.
Now, her call girl ring that she set up fell under the vice map of Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen. Employing extremely attractive girls, Brenda only catered to the illustrious and lecherous elite. Using advertisements in the Players Directory, Brenda had the tie-ins with major movie studio executives and others in the upper echelons of Los Angeles. Brenda was known as the Vice Queen of Movieland. It was also rumored that she had a, quote, business partner who was an business manager who was an officer in administrative vice and was the reason she had entered the, quote, big times through her payoffs within this partnership. Brenda Allen's high-class call girl ring worked as follows. Serving only the wealthiest clients, Brenda Allen subscribed to professional telephone exchange similar to those used by some movie people, attorneys, and physicians. A prospective customer or returning client would call and ask for Brenda. If the gentleman calling was a previous client, he would identify himself. Otherwise, he'd state his referral. Brenda and the gentleman would have a conversation regarding what the man was looking for, including requests for specific girls or characteristics and traits of what they needed, and the price would be agreed upon. After their credit was checked, Brenda would then call a girl, and as she did not permit, quote, tricks to be serviced from her residence. Brenda would give the girl pertinent information about the customer or client, and the girl would then call a taxi or even be chauffeured to the location. For some of the girls, they even had their own luxurious apartments. Through investigations into Brenda Allen, led by Sergeant Charles Stoker, it was learned that she had more than 100 girls in her employment. It was also found out that Brenda was not just working out of an apartment building, but also owned a separate bungalow just half a block away. And many of the girls would use this bungalow as well to stay there or do bonus work. I don't know.
quick question before we continue. You said that her ring was in the same territory as Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel. Is she paying protection money to both of these guys, or are they kind of working together? Do you know?
The profits of all this, and from what I understand, the protection of all this went to Bugsy Siegel.
Okay.
So it fell in his vice map
Mm-hmm.
area, I guess you say, his area. And so he was the one that was kind of receiving all the stuff from her. Now, okay. I know it seems like we're spinning off into some weird LA history that, but I promise you, we are about to come full circle back to the Black Dahlia. I have got to tell you this foundational stuff for it to make sense later on. So,
for sure.
Now, also operating at this time within the LAPD was the Gangster Squad, which had a dark history as well. This unit worked closely with the police chief and administrative vice in gathering intelligence and was originally called the Intelligence Unit under the reign of Police Chief James Two Gun Davis. But the Intelligence Unit was essentially Chief Davis's enforcers and protectors of the vice take from the underworld. It was when Angelenos had learned that in 1938, the members of the Intelligence Unit had tried to assassinate grand jury investigator Clifford Clinton, who was investigating the LAPD corruption and payoffs, that the Intelligence Unit was disbanded and became replaced by the Gangster Squad. But even under Chief Clements Harrell, the Gangster Squad continued to be enforcers and protectors. Only the name had changed. Well, this is the world that Elizabeth Short visited on several occasions and began her run-in with several individuals fluent in the world of the mafia. Now, prior to returning to Los Angeles with Red, the Black Dahlia had been a resident of Los Angeles on 3 separate occasions. First was her initial visit with her father, Cleo Short, in 1943, which we talked about last episode, which ended a month or two later, and the pair separated when she was ultimately arrested in Santa Barbara, California. Now, in August of 1944, that is the second time, she ends up staying with a girl named Lucille Varela at the Clinton Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Now, this hotel was operated by Nate Bass, who also ran several mafia-run bars in the downtown area, but the hotel was a front. Nate would run ads in southern states and cities seeking girls for employment as models in the movies. Once the girls answered the ads, they were sent to the Clinton Hotel, and efforts were made to change their career into a life of prostitution, also known as B-girl. And one of the ladies that Elizabeth Short, now she's staying at this hotel, so we know that she's around this. One of the ladies that Elizabeth Short met through Lucille Varela was Barbara Payton, whom she'd met at Al Green's nightlife bar. Now, Albert Louis Greenberg, known as Al Green, had a long rap sheet and did odd job robberies and rub-outs on the side for Bugsy Siegel, and was also a former bootlegger for Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky. And Peyton was instrumental in telling Elizabeth the right places to, quote, be seen. And one of those places was the Formosa Cafe, which was a bookie joint, and the location where Bugsy Siegel kept his office and his books about his vice operations of his syndicate empire. And another location Elizabeth was frequently seen at during her trip in 1944 was the Hollywood Canteen. Now, the final time Elizabeth lived in Los Angeles was after she had bounced back to Medford, Massachusetts in March of 1945, then came back to Miami by September the same year before returning to Medford in the spring in 1946, and then shipping her luggage to Indianapolis on June 1st, 1946 on that. She was headed off to meet Lieutenant Fickling, according to her mother, which was a serviceman and a love interest. She had met him while they were in Florida.
Right.
Their interaction was cut short because he went overseas during the wartime, which I went a little further into last time. Now, according to Phoebe Short, that's Elizabeth's mother, Elizabeth was going to the Chicago area because Flicking was going to be returning to the United States. And police records indicate that when she went to Chicago, she stayed at the Park Row Hotel from June 24th until July 9th. Sorry. Afterwards, she made her way back to California for the third and final time on July 12th, 1946. And the Black Dahlia's 5-month stay in Los Angeles between July 2nd and December 6th, 1946, it showed that she had resided in at least 11 different locations and had at least 50 different male acquaintances. When she first arrived, she checked into a hotel in Long Beach, and it's here in Long Beach where she would have claimed the now infamous moniker of the Black Dahlia, which I told you last time.
Mm-hmm.
And allegedly, according to Phoebe Short, Elizabeth had gone to Long Beach because that's where Lieutenant Fickling was being discharged from. This placed Fickling into the number 1 spot, which had recently been vacated by Red Manley. And when detectives Hansen and Brown, that's Harry Hansen, Finis Brown, were able to track down Lieutenant Fickling back to Charlotte, North Carolina, they sought him out for questioning.
In Charlotte?
In Charlotte.
That blows my mind. That I never knew anything about that. And that happened in my freaking hometown. Holy shit.
Yep. Charlotte, North Carolina is where they tracked him back to. So they sought his ass out for questioning. Of course.
Shit, dude. That's so cool.
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he adamantly denied any involvement and included that there were no plans to marry Elizabeth Short, despite what she had said. He stated that the last time he and Elizabeth were together was from August 20th until August 27th, 1946. Mm-hmm. He also had an airtight alibi. He had taken up a job as a pilot, and his employer and coworkers said he was on flight assignments when Elizabeth disappeared. So he could not have been there.
Right.
But one new piece of evidence that came from this interview was a letter that Lieutenant Fickling produced dated December 13th, 1946. In the letter, Elizabeth had asked him for money, probably so she could pay the Frenches, because at this point, that's when she was living with the Frenches due to their kindness and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so he ends up sending her or wired her $100. Now, the equivalent of, I think, is about $600, something like that in today's money.
And just recapping, the Frenches was were the mother and daughter she was staying with when she said she was waiting for her service husband to come back from the war,
correct.
Right?
Correct. Okay, so she ends up, not that she's waiting for him to come back from the war.
He died.
She was a war widow. Yeah, she was a war widow. She was waiting on money to come, and she would pay them back if they would let her stay. It was supposed to be for a night. She ends up staying like a month. So, yeah, this is the place where she's living whenever she's asking for this money.
Okay.
Well, finally, a new lead was produced in this interview as well, when Fickling said that he received yet another letter from Elizabeth dated January 8th, 1947, the same day as the last letter her mother received. This would be, within this letter, Elizabeth stated, quote, "Do not write me here. I am planning to go to Chicago to work for Jack. Now, Lieutenant Fickling told the detectives that this, quote, Jack operated a, quote, modeling agency.
Okay.
Now, in my opinion, I don't think that Elizabeth took Lieutenant Fickling's kind of rejection, because when he leaves her on August 27th, I don't think she took that rejection very well. Because it's the day after that he leaves on August 28th, 1946. She checked out of the hotel she was with him, checked into the notorious Hawthorne Hotel. And it is here that at the Hawthorne Hotel where a strange set of occurrences began to take place. And at this point, Elizabeth now has less than 5 months to live. Well, the Hawthorne Hotel was known to be a rendezvous spot for prostitutes who worked the Roosevelt not too far away. The Hawthorne Hotel was also owned by Nate Bass and was operated by Glenn Wolfe, who also owned the Chancellor Apartments, where Elizabeth Short's name appeared on the mailbox, sharing a space with 5 other women. So it's the Chancellor Apartment. She's lived there as well. Now it's going to be hard to figure out all these 11 different locations. So I'm telling you the most important ones.
Gotcha.
So just
with you.
Hear me on that. So yes, she did live at the Chancellor Apartments at one point. But we're talking about the Hawthorne Hotel here. Well, Elizabeth Short shared a room with 2 young women at the Hawthorne, Lynn Martin and one she knew from childhood back in Medford, Massachusetts, Marjorie Graham. Now, the desk clerk gave testimony and said that, quote, Miss Short was always getting behind on her rent. When she did, a short, dark-complexioned man, about 35 or 40, came in and paid her bill. He used to drive an old Ford sedan and park it out front. When Beth left the hotel last September, she piled her baggage into the dark, short-complexioned man's car and drove off, end quote. Well, this man drove Elizabeth to the Florentine Gardens. Now, the Florentine Gardens was owned by a multimillionaire proprietor named Mark Hansen, no relation to the detective Hansen that is working the case.
Okay.
Mark Hansen also owned a number of rooming houses. Well, the Florentine Gardens that he owned was a well-known location that hosted many showgirl floor shows, and where many of rising Hollywood starlets and aspiring actresses got their first break. However, it's also rumored and understood that the Florentine Gardens was a front for the syndicate. Basically, by now, I think everything in Los Angeles is a front for this, front for the mob, basically. So I think
it's just as mobbed up as Vegas is. Yeah.
Right. Anything involved in show business at this particular moment in time is all mobbed up.
Yeah, very true. So, I'm sorry. On September 28th, 1946, Elizabeth Short moved into one of the rooming houses owned by Mark Hansen and shared a room with Hollywood starlet Ann Toth. Now, sorry, I lost my place in pictures. Okay, sorry. I was trying to get back to, I had a picture of Ann Toth that didn't make it in. Okay. Crap happens. It's a live show. We just roll with it.
It'll be fun. We're talking mobsters and murder. It's all good.
I know.
Yeah, keep going. We got this.
Ann Toth described Elizabeth's occasional visitor also as, quote, short, dark complexioned man in his late 30s, 5 feet 6 inches tall, of medium build, a little fellow, and he drove an older model Ford sedan. Called him Maurice, and he had promised to, quote, set up Elizabeth in an apartment in Beverly Hills, end quote. Okay. Well, by October 1946, both Elizabeth and Marjorie, her friend from childhood, were now staying at Mark Hansen's rooming house, but Mark Hansen wanted them out as things were not going so well. So the pair of women moved into the Guardian Arms Hotel with 2 gentlemen, Bill Robertson and Marvin Margulies. According to Robertson, it was his understanding that the 2 women wanted to return to Massachusetts, but Marjorie was the only one who could actually afford to make the trip back home to Medford. So she did, leaving Elizabeth behind by herself. Well, Marjorie and Elizabeth roomed with Bill Robertson and Marvin Margulies from October 10th until October 22nd. As Marjorie had left, Bill and Marvin moved Elizabeth Short back into one of Mark Hansen's residences. So she's doing this bouncing back and forth at this point.
Yeah.
Pretending, and this is all stuff that investigators are finding out through these witness testimonies and these interviews that they're conducting right now. While pretending to be Elizabeth Short's cousin, Marvin asked Mark Hansen if Elizabeth could keep her luggage there overnight. Well, he agreed, but Mark Hansen, in his grand jury testimony, said that he returned to his residence and noticed that Elizabeth Short was there, which confused him. And citing she would only stay the one night, Elizabeth asked Hansen to let her stay another night, and Hansen agreed to allow it. As with the Frenches, one night turned into 2 nights, and two into several. So we see this, this habit forming with her. Eventually, Mark Hansen grew tired of her and said that he didn't like the people that she had ran around with and none of her, quote, business in or around his residence. So he kicked her out, and back to the now Chancellor Apartments is where she went. And it was on December 6, 1946, that Mark Hansen came back to his residence again and found Elizabeth Short there with Ann Toth. And Elizabeth was crying, kept telling both Ann Toth and Mark Hansen that she was headed to visit her sister in Oakland, that she was scared, and kept saying she needed to get out of there. Well, after consoling her, Mark Hansen took Elizabeth back to the Chandler Apartments, and he says that this is the last time that he would ever see her alive. So he is questioned a little bit further because he, again, has a very heavy connection with her. And in the grand jury testimony, he's actually questioned because it was alleged that he would go around bragging about having medical knowledge. Well, we know that the body being bisected in half was done very neatly, very clean, and with medical precision. And he obviously denies the allegations. And it was like, no, I didn't do that. He says in the test, I don't even brag. I don't even do this. So it wasn't me. Well, by now, the detectives were beginning to trace Black Dahlia's movements and into the later portion, end of December of 1946. What they had gathered so far that was on the last night prior to her leaving for San Diego, as well as the following day on December 7th, before she leaves, she was telling 3 individuals that she was scared and needed to get out of there. Those individuals were Mark Hansen, Ann Toth, and a roommate, Linda Rohr, which we talked last episode about.
Mm-hmm.
Also noted by now are several witnesses that she had a frequent visitor or caller by the name of Maurice, which several of them describing him as the dark complexion man in his late 30s to 40s, 5 foot 6 inches tall and of medium build. That is said in almost, I can't tell you how many interviews and quotes that I've read, that is said in almost every single person's interview about Maurice.
And Maurice is the one that wants to take her back to Beverly Hills, but she's not going for whatever reason. He wants to set her up in his apartment and she's not going.
That's a quote that's a statement that Ann Toth said that that Elizabeth told her that he was going to, quote, set her up in an apartment in Beverly Hills.
But Elizabeth also told all these people she was going to marry all these different guys too.
Exactly. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt.
She had a bit of maybe she just wanted to be in love, be married, be taken care of. And maybe that was just building herself up, and it's her own little fantasy world, building up her idea of, he's going to take me to Beverly Hills, living more in her fantasy than in her reality.
Yeah, because the thing is with Elizabeth is that what I've really learned from reading into her life is that she is very romantic. She is a huge lover, essentially.
She seems like it.
And that's all she dreamed about, was just being married, is what it seems like. Go ahead, Ryan.
But she continues to get with these people, and every situation she ends up in, she is cast out and nobody wants her.
Yeah.
And you can't help but feel for her.
Yeah. Well, several of the witnesses also stated that Maurice drove an older model, possibly 1936 or 1937 Ford sedan, much like the one witnessed at the Norton Avenue crime scene by Bob Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Maurice turned out to be Maurice Clement, a Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen minion and procurer and chauffeur for Brenda Allen's notorious call girl ring.
Oh.
According to a Columbia Studios employee, Maurice Clement worked for the talent department at Columbia Studios. Ann Toth spoke about Elizabeth's secret calls when Mark Hansen wasn't around in the rooming house. One of them to someone in Beverly Hills and another to Maurice. That was basically all that she talked to while there.
So maybe she's caught the eye of a gangster who wants to put her into prostitution and is having Maurice continue to do these nice things for her and hound her in order to get her into this particular prostitution ring.
That sounds very plausible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, witnesses had also placed Elizabeth Short in the company of Maurice in at least 4 separate occasions at Brittingham's restaurant. Since there were witnesses, when questioned by police, Maurice Clement actually admitted to being with Elizabeth, but told police he had only met Elizabeth in early December. Now, in the footnotes of the grand jury papers, they speak of these meetings, and it says, quote, also interviewed was Maurice Clement, who stated he met her about December 1st in Brittingham's restaurant on Sunset Boulevard. At that time, she was broke, and he paid for her dinner check. He stated he saw her possibly 3 to 4 times within that week, end quote. But we know this not to be true based on witness testimony. The desk clerk at the Hawthorne said he saw Maurice come in and pay Elizabeth's rent when she got behind. And Toth also said that one of the frequent callers to Elizabeth was Maurice. So this would put the timeline back to something like September 1946, not December 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And Toth also stated that sometime in November, she had dropped Elizabeth Short off at the Biltmore Hotel, where she believed she was meeting Maurice. And it was said that Maurice was driving Elizabeth to a doctor's office on Hollywood Boulevard. Well, Elizabeth's former roommate, Cheryl Milan, also spoke of one of Elizabeth's frequent callers, his name being Maurice.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that the night that Elizabeth's body was found on January 15th, 1947, a man by the name of Clement walked into a Hollywood bar and asked to speak to Cheryl. Cheryl never approached the man, but was able to describe him as a slight, dapper, and olive-complexioned man. What's interesting about Maurice Clement is that he was never mentioned by Captain Donahoe or the press, but the recent release of the Black Dahlia files placed him high on the suspect list. I believe he's listed at number 7, if I remember correctly, and all the stuff that I was reading.
Is that number 7? Is that in probability or is that in
probability?
Probability. Okay.
Probability. Yeah, probability.
I just heard doctor's appointment. My ears perked up, and I'm going, he taking her to the doctor?
Mm-hmm.
What you had to go to the doctor for? Continue on with your fabulous story.
Yeah, because I'm thinking the same thing you are, Shelley. I think I know where you're going with that.
Well, Detective Finis Brown stated the LAPD had questioned Maurice, quote, several times, but there has never been a transcript of Clement's interrogation. And when asked by Ann Toth, quote, who is Clement? Detective Brown misled her, stating, quote, Clement is a teacher. That's what he told her.
Okay.
Well, in an article titled Police Seek Mysterious Thin Man in Black Dahlia Case, it spoke about the house-to-house police investigation surrounding Leimert Park, where her body was found. Another witness, Mr. Johnson, told investigators that he had driven over to the vacant lot on Norton to dump a load of clippings he had cut that day around 9 p.m. As he slowed the car, he said he noticed a 1935, maybe 6 sedan parked opposite of the fire plug near where Elizabeth's body was found. Standing near the car was a very dapper man, about early 40s, no more than 5'8", and wearing a tan top coat and dark hat pulled low. The right door to the sedan was open. As Mr. Johnson stopped to unload the clippings, the man looked up startled, crossed the street, and slowly walked past Johnson's car with his hands in his pockets, craning his neck to look at Johnson and then into his car. Well, thinking that he was a bandit, Johnson got back into his car, circled the block, and came back. When he got back to the spot, the man was now in the driver's seat of the sedan, and the right rear door was now closed. And when the man saw Johnson pulling back up, he's hightailed it the hell out of there with grinding gears and burning tires, is what Johnson said. And this made investigators wonder if the murder site could have actually been premeditated. But what caught their eye was the word of the sedan. Mm-hmm. Little puzzle piece for you. Pick it up. No, I was kidding.
I mean, so at all these scenes, we have a small, dark-complected man driving an old Ford sedan in every single one of these instances. I wonder who could have done it.
Very, very quick question, though. So we know that this dark-complected, small man, dapper
How you
man.
doing?
Yeah. Well, it's stated he's about 5'6". How tall was Elizabeth again?
She's about the same height. I believe she's about 5'6" as well.
Okay. I'm just mental notes.
Okay.
Because the dude who's my height ain't gonna kick my ass. Just throwing it out there.
Well, as the investigation continued, so did the 10th day of headlines, and the story was beginning to dwindle. With Red Manley cleared, Donahoe had a, quote, new turn of events. And he says, quote, we believe the killer may have been a woman. The murdered girl was known to have been in the city from January 9th to January 14th without her baggage and makeup kit. It only seems logical that the short girl may have been staying with a woman where she could get a change of clothes, end quote.
That is a rather large jump.
Well, just saying. I know. When I read this, I was like, what? I was like, what the fuck?
It's like, where did that come from? That is from so far out in left field that it makes no sense in connection to the case.
His thoughts were, this new revelation was...
Is that because she had on makeup? It was a chick that killed her?
No, it's because it had to do with the severing of Elizabeth Short's body. He concluded that she was butchered by a female who was too weak to lift the entire 123-pound torso. However,
from the coroner's report, though, we know that it happened after she was... Okay, continue, sorry.
Well, however, what Donahoe did not take into account was that this same female would have not only had to subdue Elizabeth, but also tie her up, place her in a bathtub where Dr. Frederick Newbar, the chief autopsy surgeon, was convinced that she was bisected. So you can't lift her whenever she's alive and struggling. Good luck with dead weight.
Right.
You know. Well, this strange turn of events was the reason for the arrest and interrogations of Elizabeth's former roommates, Lynn Martin and Marjorie Graham. Marjorie was quickly cleared as she was back in Medford, Massachusetts already. But it was found out that during Lynn Martin's interrogation that her real name was actually Norma Lee Mayer and that she was only 16 years old and she was a runaway. But again, headlines seemed to dissipate because Lynn Martin was quickly cleared. It really seemed that Donahoe was throwing Lynn Martin's name in as a red herring, knowing she didn't possess the medical skills necessary to complete the mutilation. And as quickly as the investigation was gaining steam, it seemed to be progressing quicker towards derailment. This particular MO had never been seen before in a murder in Los Angeles. However, my favorite character, Aggie Underwood, with the Herald Express, remembered the murder of Georgette Bauerdorf, which had significant similarities to the Black Dahlia case. Now remember, Aggie has pretty much the gift of total recall. I think that's why I love her. But anyways, Georgette and Elizabeth Short had both volunteered at the Hollywood Canteen in 1944 before it had closed. Georgette was the attractive daughter of wealthy East Coast industrialist George Bauerdorf, who was also a close friend to William Randolph Hearst that we spoke about earlier. It was during Aggie's research of the police ledger involving open murder cases that she made it and committed to this memory, that she has, the link between Elizabeth Short and Georgette Bauerdorf, even though the murder had been on October 2nd, 1944, a little more than 2 years prior to Elizabeth's murder. See, Georgette and Elizabeth, go ahead.
I was just going to say, okay, so she has an eidetic memory. She remembers everything, perfect total recall. And she's connecting a case that's 2 years prior?
Correct.
Okay, well, if you know anything about serial killers, there's a cooling off period between, but they usually do at least 3. That's what makes them a serial killer. Had there been another one in there anywhere that she had found similarities?
I'm gonna hold off on answering that for just a
Sorry,
bit.
I'm not trying to jump.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. Hey, I've always said if it's part of the story, I ain't gonna answer it. You'll just have to wait to hear. So Georgette and Elizabeth were both born in 1924, but Georgette had grown up in a wealthy family on Park Avenue in New York before moving to Los Angeles. Now, during her school days, Georgette was known as, quote, a party girl. Since Georgette's murder occurred in West Hollywood, it fell under the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. The managers of the apartment building discovered Georgette's body. They reported hearing a commotion and a loud crash at midnight and found Georgette's door open the next day. Upon entering, they found the apartment flooded with water and Georgette's body in the bathtub. Detectives found bloodstains near her bed as well as the lower half of her torn pajamas that had been cut with a knife. Another neighbor stated that she noted Georgette's door was open when she returned shortly after midnight. The murder was determined to have taken place close to midnight, and the cause of death was asphyxiation from a cloth found in Georgette's throat. The marks on Georgette's hand suggested she fought back, and the bruising on her face, lips, abdomen, and thighs indicated that her attacker possessed great strength and had ape-like hands. After being asphyxiated, Georgette's body was then placed into the bathtub. Her purse was scattered and the keys to her car were missing. Her abandoned Oldsmobile was found 3 days later with the keys still inside, and witness reported seeing a tall man with a limp exiting the car and walking away. A friend and a co-worker of Georgette's informed the police that Georgette had danced and interacted with several servicemen on the night she was murdered, but there was one particular person she found annoying and bothersome. This co-worker described that person as over 6 feet tall and walking with a limp. Well, detectives discovered several fingerprints in Georgette's apartment, including on a light bulb above the entrance of her door. The light bulb had been unscrewed to prevent it from being turned on. Detectives believe this was done by the killer to gain entry forcibly. The light fixture was 8 feet high above the foundation of the door. So someone over 6 feet tall would be probably the only one who could reach it just standing there. Well, in the early 2000s, Donald Wolfe, author of the Black Dahlia files, visited Georgette's apartment and noted that the fixture was actually still there. So standing underneath it, he reached up to try and grab it. And based on his height at 6 foot 1 inches and long arms, he says, he estimated that Georgette's killer would have had to have been around 6 foot 4 inches, somewhere around there. And good old Aggie believes the connection between Short and Bauerdorf cases could be linked to the bathtub, despite the different MOs. Well, records from the Hollywood Canteen indicated that actor Arthur Lake had interacted with both Short and Bauerdorf on certain occasions. However, when questioned by detectives, he mentioned that he may have talked to them, but couldn't provide any further help. And he also emphasized that his wife was the niece of Marion Davies, a close friend of William Randolph Hearst and George Bauerdorf, Georgette's father, and insisted that any additional questioning should be directed to his attorney. So he's very cooperative.
Okay.
Well, sheriff's investigators believe there was a connection between Bauerdorf and Short as well, but one Detective Frank Esquivel, informed Aggie Underwood that the investigations into both cases had been obstructed and logical lines of inquiry were completely shut down. Well, prior to the Black Dahlia case, Aggie Underwood had managed to maintain her independence and honesty at the Herald Express. However, her journalistic integrity was compromised when she was forced into silence after reporting a front page story. Here's your answer, Shelley. In this article, Aggie featured the Bauerdorf case on January 23rd, 1947, alongside 7 other unsolved murders of women. This raised questions about the LAPD's competence in solving these cases. Despite efforts by the press to keep the story on the front page, it eventually lost prominence. Following the publication of her story connecting the unsolved cases, Aggie began investigating the Bauerdorf and Short cases further, with a focus on Arthur Lake. However, before she could complete her investigation, her editor instructed her to kill the story, and she was eventually removed from the Dahlia case. Aggie learned that William Randolph Hearst, also known as, quote, the boss, had made the decision to suppress the story. Instead of challenging the decision and taking her skills to another newspaper, Aggie was instantly promoted from reporter to city editor. But she knew that her promotion was to keep her silent.
Man, this whole thing just stinks to high heaven. And
Telling you.
So you go ahead.
I was to say, so do we know that? So with those other 7 unsolved murders, we know that the Bauerdorf and the Short murders, were connected. Do we know if there was a similar MO in the other 5? Or
I tried to look into some of those, but man, when you're trying to keep MOs straight for 5 different cases and trying to also get the story done for this and everything like that, I'm not gonna be able to answer that honestly, of if the MO was similar or not,
because that actually was part of my question as well.
Yeah.
Because really, what it sounds like, with the case of the schoolgirl that was found with the flooded apartment, that actually doesn't seem like the MO quite matches, except for the coincidence of they were both cut.
Right.
So
and Lake.
Yeah.
is also a common thread there.
Yeah, Arthur Lake. Yeah.
So that to me, it's funny because that doesn't really seem like that exactly matches. The car was taken, her purse was scattered. The Black Dahlia was left with nothing.
Nothing.
So it seems like that might be two different people to me. But so they were basically put all these girls on the front page of this paper because they had something that was close in each of them that tied them, but none of them had the exact same MO, if I'm remembering correctly. And what
from
they
what
all had a piece that connected them, but they weren't really tied to the same person.
To try to answer your question as best I can, Ryan. From what I didn't look into each individual case itself because trying to get all those facts down,
that's a lot.
It would have taken me forever to do that. What I did read was certain different articles and stuff on these unsolved murders. And it was, like Shelley is saying, it was close enough in cases. There was that one little thing that they were like, hey, maybe.
One thread
and that's why they were trying to link these things together.
Mm-hmm.
But the LAPD they were pissed off about this because they were like, dude, you're questioning our competency.
Right.
You know?
Then solve a damn case.
Well, yeah, true.
So another question I have, though, too, is do we know if Lake was mobbed up? And do we also know what his height was? Could he have been the tall man?
I've got a little more on Lake later on.
Okay.
That I'll be able to give you on that.
All
so, well, Aggie always wondered if she'd made the right choice about being promoted, never mentioning the connection between the Bowerdorf, Short, and Lake cases at the time or ever again. It would be years later when she finally understood the exact nature of that connection. Now, along the same lines, there were also other avenues that never received an assignment from Jim Richardson, the editor of the Los Angeles Examiner. Examiner reporter Will Fowler shared an interesting backstory that involved Richardson, City Hall, William Randolph Hearst, and the Black Dahlia case. Richardson's entry into journalism was facilitated by his uncle, Friend Richardson, who was a newspaper editor and protege of Hearst before becoming California's governor. Friend Richardson had appointed Judge Fletcher Bowron, who later ran for mayor after that scandal that brought down Shaw. Jim Richardson became close friends with Bowron while rising through the ranks of the Examiner. Now, this friendship proved useful when Richardson lost his job due to his battle with alcoholism. Mayor Bowron intervened on his behalf with William Hearst and secured his rehiring on the condition that he would never drink again. And Richardson complied and eventually became editor of the Examiner, with a strong loyalty to Bowron. And Will Fowler was aware that Richardson had knowledge of connections between the Black Dahlia case and City Hall, but they had no intention of exploring at the Examiner. But as the headlines began to slip and interest in the story began to dwindle, Jim Richardson received a break in the case late one night. On January 24th, 1947, after a long evening, the telephone rang at the Los Angeles Examiner. Jim Richardson answered the phone and the following conversation took place. Caller, is this the city editor? Richardson. Yes. Caller, what's your name, please? Richardson. Richardson. Caller, well, Mr. Richardson, I must congratulate you on what the Examiner has done in the Black Dahlia case. Richardson. Thank you. Caller, you seem to have run out of material. Richardson. That's right. Caller. Well, maybe I can be of some assistance. Richardson. We need it. Caller. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send you some of the things she had on her when she, shall we say, disappeared. Richardson quickly scribbled, "Trace this call" on a piece of paper to his secretary. Richardson. What kind of things? Caller. Oh, say her address book, her birth certificate, a few other things she had in her handbag. Richardson. When will I get them? Caller. Oh, within the next day or so. See how far you can get with them. Now I must say goodbye. Richardson. Wait a minute. Caller. But aren't you trying to trace this call?
What the literal fuck?
Richardson didn't know what to believe. However, a package intercepted by LAPD, but postmarked for January 24th, 1947, was sent to the Examiner, containing items from the Black Dahlia's handbag. With words cut from the Hearst papers, it read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." Included inside this package was the obituary for Matt Gordon, the man that she claimed to be the war widow from. Business cards of several casual acquaintances, Elizabeth's identification, birth certificate, social security card, her address book, and the Greyhound stub tickets where she checked her baggage before she got dropped off at the Biltmore Hotel. Dusting the envelope for fingerprints was of no use, as the sender has doused the package in gasoline to get rid of them. Smudge marks were found on this and sent for testing, but nothing was found. However, good old Donahoe announced to the press that they had prints, and they were going to be forwarded to the FBI, because he's a sack of shit. However, Elizabeth's file has no record of the FBI ever receiving any prints other than the ones that were sent for her identification. Shelley, you look perplexed. You okay over there?
So I see holes in this left and right.
Okay.
But I also see where there could be some credibility to it. Just because he has these items and these items were sent from the handbag does not mean that that's the killer. That could have been somebody who snatched her handbag from her and now wants to have his 15 minutes of fame. Because if this truly is, as we're being led to believe, have something to do with some very powerful people in LA, I don't think that they would want to rile up the press, being that it was a lot of press people who were involved.
Yeah.
Or this could just be a red herring. This whole thing could just, because you have some very powerful people involved in these cases that have all been connected. Not all of them, but the thread with Lake and the Hearst family. This could be someone they're working with, or someone they had send this in to throw them off, because we know that serial killers oftentimes will brag to the press or brag to someone about what they did. And this,
I don't think this is a serial killer.
And that's what I'm saying. But I think that this is like to throw them off the trail, to make this seem like it's a serial killer, but it's not.
And I think that this is just some idiot who has her handbag, who found that whenever her things were discarded, that they chunked her handbag in a dumpster. Some idiot found it and wants to, because really, if you're working for somebody powerful, you're going to take attention away. But it's awfully.
Hold on, wait, because you're forgetting one little fact though. This makes it very interesting. These things they come to them and they look like they came directly out of her handbag. They are her items.
Right.
Yeah.
Her handbag was thrown in an incinerator.
Oh, you're right.
So how are these things unburned whenever her handbag is completely scorched and had been found in an incinerator?
Could have been taken out before it was burned.
Which,
I mean, yeah.
Why did they have her damn handbag then?
Because wasn't it left on top of a dumpster for someone?
It was found in an incinerator. It left on top of a trash can by the guy who found it, so that he thought it looked very interesting why it was in his cafe's incinerator. Left it on a garbage can so he could get something for it to put it in, take it to the police. And a garbage truck came and took it before he could. So they had to go trace it down at the city dump. They eventually found it. Yes.
They could have emptied it before it was chunked in the incinerator. That seems like an easy explanation.
But what? Okay. All right. Okay. No, I was yeah. I'm going back to like Shelley's saying that there's holes in this of somehow. So anyway, okay. We'll keep, because y'all are getting there. Y'all are putting the puzzle pieces together. But let me continue a little bit and give you just a little bit more here. So the address book of Elizabeth Short's is what caught particular attention, with rumors suggesting that over 75 prominent figures in Los Angeles and Hollywood were listed in its pages. The names were never disclosed to avoid embarrassing those not involved in the case. The contents of the address book were kept completely confidential. Jim Richardson discovered that certain names and addresses had been intentionally removed from the book before it was placed in the envelope. When it was found that the name Mark Hansen, owner of the Florentine Gardens, was embossed on front and gold, Donahoe considered him a prime suspect. But Hansen said, yeah, I had that address book at my house where she was staying, and it was stolen from my desk. He said, I didn't make any entries into it, which is implying that Elizabeth herself had recorded all the entries. Well, it'd be on January 27th, after this package was received, another letter, this time in messy handwriting, was received with the message, here it is, Turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police. Signed, Black Dahlia Avenger. Now, this suggested that the killer planned to surrender to the Los Angeles Examiner. And this generated, obviously, new headlines with increased public fascination with the case. But by 9 a.m. on January 29th, LAPD officers were stationed at every entrance of the Los Angeles Examiner. However, as noon approached, the Black Dahlia Avenger failed to appear. By midnight, Richardson realized they had all been deceived by this cunning killer. The lack of the killer's appearance caused interest in the Black Dahlia's case to decline. Numerous letters poured in, but it was concluded that only the phone call and the initial first 4 letters came from the actual killer. The rest were hoaxes. Richardson actually began to suspect that Donahoe had fabricated the letters, phone call, and the contents of the handbag to hide the truth of the case. However, Richardson chose not to pursue this lead. With waning interests, attention shifted to a murder location outside of the city, as no blood-soaked crime scene had been discovered within the city. And this temporarily relieved the pressure on Donahoe and the LAPD. However, Donahoe provided conflicting information and began spewing all these freaking inconsistencies at this time. He suggested that the murder occurred outside the city. The killer was a woman with lesbian tendencies. The killer was someone Short knew. The killer was someone she didn't know. He was spouting all of this out at this point.
He just gonna blame the lesbians at this point, huh? Lesbians did it.
I guess so. It was a woman killer with lesbian tendencies.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
That was to explain the butchery that took place. That was his.
I know plenty of lesbians that don't want to butcher other lesbians. That's
well, I know, but what you got to think of the mindset back then, man. You know,
right.
with the LGBT community and all that kind of stuff. Like,
true.
Their thought process is that a lesbian is going to be some mannish woman, which is totally not the case, obviously.
No.
But that would explain why he said, you know, oh, she's a female killer, and would also explain the mutilation, the butchery of it all.
He's
is because
idiot,
she's a lesbian.
Well,
yes, he is. He's a freaking idiot.
He's an idiot, but he's an idiot with power that's trying to throw everybody else off the case.
He is.
By
very true.
Planting all of these different scenarios and So
yeah. Well, Detective Harry Hansen had a strong suspicion that Donahoe was intentionally manipulating the facts related to the case.
Mm-hmm.
Hansen believed that the actual crime scene was closer to where the handbag and the shoes were found in the incinerator. Donahoe seemed to be emphasizing a different theory about the location. Despite Red Manley positively identifying the items as belonging to Elizabeth, Donahoe contacted the Frenches, who claimed they couldn't confirm that they were hers. Well, of course, it had been like a couple of days since they last saw her. Donahoe even made a public statement denying that the handbag and shoes belonged to Elizabeth. However, the French's last interaction, as we were just saying, was on January 8th with her. Well, Red Manley had identified the shoes Elizabeth was wearing because of the double caps on the bottom of the heel and Elizabeth's specific request for him to take her to buy said caps.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he said, yes, these are hers. Not only do they look familiar, but there's double caps on the bottom of this. We stopped and bought them. Well, by the end of the 3rd week, Donahoe had to admit to the press that they were stumped. There were no leads, no suspects, no witnesses, or even a murder scene. The files were filled with false confessions, leads, suspects, but no concrete evidence. Every avenue seemed to be blocked. Hansen began to suspect that Donahoe was now intentionally obstructing the investigation itself. Hansen was a dedicated and honest detective, but he had a falling out with his partner, Detective Finis Brown, during this time when he found out that Brown was reporting everything back to Gangster Squad Lieutenant Willie Burns. As a result, Hansen locked up his files on the Black Dahlia case. Now, the 1949 grand jury transcripts revealed that there were actually at this time 2 separate files on the case, one of them being with the homicide department and one with the Gangster Squad. Despite knowing that Donahoe and Brown were trying to derail the investigation, Hansen continued with his own inquiries. He focused his attention on a short, dark-complexioned man who drove an old black Ford sedan, Maurice Clement. Donahoe's problems arose, though, when Hansen discovered that the individuals from Elizabeth's address book, whom he had been planning to interview, had already been interrogated by Gangster Squad officers Archie Case and James Ahern. Former officer with the administrative vice, Vince Carter, revealed that Donahoe was afraid that these people would provide evidence related to the Black Dahlia case. Heaven forbid. This violated the investigation's procedures, so Hansen reported the issue to Chief of Detectives William Bradley. And Hansen later discovered that both the officers, Case and Ahern, had been instructed by Assistant Chief Joe Reed and Donahoe to determine just how much these individuals knew about the connection between the Black Dahlia and a very influential figure on the police commission. One of those interviewed by Case and Ahern was actor Arthur Lake, who was also a close friend to Norman Chandler, the heir of the Chandler family, publisher of the Los Angeles Times, and also served as the head of the police commission.
Back around to the Chandler dynasty.
Yes.
According to a number of officers in the administrative vice department, it was widely known that high-ranking personnel within the LAPD were receiving the bribes from the syndicate, and that these bribes were facilitated by Captain Jack Donahoe, the syndicate's operative at Central. Vince Carter stated that many officers in administrative vice were aware that Donahoe was providing misleading information to the press and the public regarding the Black Dahlia case, but chose not to speak out due to fear of retribution from Donahoe's criminal connections. The completely unfounded rumor that gained significant traction was the claim that the victim, Elizabeth Short, was a lesbian, which was further exaggerated by false assertions that she had childlike genitals and was therefore unable to have sexual relations with men, resulting in relationships with women instead. These baseless allegations were then perpetuated by screenwriter Ben Hecht and published in the Herald Express, resulting in widespread newspaper coverage that included a detailed description of a fictional female killer. I'm going to say it's important to note that every one of those claims above that I just said are entirely false. Well, by the beginning of February, the Black Dahlia case had lost public interest, and there hadn't been much progress in the investigation. Well, on February 10th, 1947, the murder of female pilot Jean French became the top news story. Not to be confused with the Frenches we talked about that live in San Diego. Not related, just different French. Her body was found naked in an isolated area of Culver City around 7 miles away from Leimert Park. The killer had brutally kicked and stomped her to death and used red lipstick to write an offensive message and the letters BD on her body. B as in boy, D as in dog.
Okay.
Her murder became known as the Red Lipstick Murder. Donahoe tried to create a connection between the Jean French murder and the Black Dahlia case and pushed this theory to the press. However, other investigators quickly realized that the two cases were completely unrelated. Donahoe's just going to try everything.
Yeah.
I guess. The methods used in the murders were completely different. As Jean had been killed out of rage and there was no knife or surgical wounds. Additionally, Jean's body was found in the same location where she was murdered, unlike the Black Dahlia's body. Donahoe's attempt to link the cases would be his final statement regarding the Black Dahlia case. So on February 19, 1947, he was removed from his position and transferred to another department. I believe he went to robbery detail. How would you like to go? I think it was, chief of detectives down to robbery detail? Good job, dude. Well, following the Red Lipstick murder, there was a series of gang-related activities and shootings. One particular shooting caught attention. On February 22nd, 1947, it was reported that Sergeant Evan V. Jackson, who was connected to Brenda Allen, shot and killed a man who was trying to enter his vehicle. It was initially reported that the person in the vehicle was Marie Blanc, but it was actually Brenda Allen herself, the intended target. The fact that Brenda Allen, a month after the Black Dahlia murder, was almost killed in a shooting was never disclosed to the public. Both the homicide and administrative vice divisions wanted to keep the name of the prominent Hollywood figure, or vice queen, out of the news due to her involvement with Sergeant Jackson and the corrupt police connections. Now, there were rumors that the attempted murder of Brenda Allen was orchestrated by mobster Jack Dragnet because Brenda allegedly had information about Elizabeth Short's murder. Brenda's bungalow she owned was 30 blocks from the site where Elizabeth was found and 15 blocks from the incinerator. After the shooting, Brenda went into hiding and was later discovered operating from a house in the Vice area controlled by Bugsy Siegel again. But it wasn't until 5 months after Black Dahlia murder And 4 months after the attempted murder of Brenda Allen, the Bugsy Siegel murder made headlines on June 20th, 1947. Now we're going to be getting into y'all's territory for a second, Shelley and Ryan. For our story, it is essential to understand the growing conflict between Bugsy Siegel and Jack Dragna. So here is a small rundown for you. When Bugsy decided to settle permanently in Los Angeles, he was accepted by many individuals. Bugsy is the picture on the right for those who are unaware. However, Jack Dragna and Johnny Rosselli were not willing to work with Bugsy. But Lucky Luciano, the boss of bosses in the mafia, demanded their cooperation. And as Shelley knows, what happens when you go against him?
Oh, you sleep with the fishes.
You die when you say no to him.
Yeah.
They make you an offer you can't refuse.
Lucky is the one you definitely don't want to
He's
say
the Luke
no
Casey, head
to.
of Luke Casey crime family.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't screw with him. That time, the most powerful mob family was the Luke Caseys.
Well, under the guidance of Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano, a division of territories was established, with Bugsy taking control of Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and Brenda Allen's call girl ring. Jack Dragna's domain included the central cities, suburbs, and Long Beach. Although Brenda's call girl ring operated in Dragna's territory, the profits all went to Bugsy Siegel.
Because Lucky says so.
Because Lucky says so, but you can tell what that's going to cause later on. But it wasn't until Bugsy started involving himself in a very large project in Las Vegas that failed, basically, almost. Well, it didn't fail. It's still thriving, but it didn't fail. But he damn near made it fail. The Flamingo Hotel, that a shooting war erupted in May of 1946, orchestrated by Jack Dragna. Bugsy Siegel, prior to his assassination, spent a significant amount of time at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, which ended up going millions of dollars over budget. He saw Nevada as a haven within the U.S. legal system where activities like race wires, prostitution, and gambling were allowed. He had hopes of shifting his syndicate empire to Vegas and making huge profits. However, the Flamingo project was initially budgeted for $1.5 million, but by September 1946, it had exceeded $3.5 million in costs, and some reports say it went as far as 6 times the original amount.
Well, and he kept coming to the 5 families asking for more money, more money, more money.
He did.
And that is not a good idea.
If you aren't earning, you better not be asking the mob for money.
No.
Yeah. As Bugsy's bank account dwindled and his checks started bouncing, he sold his stake in the Florentine Gardens for $100,000. To raise more funds, he orchestrated a series of jewelry robberies carried out by his syndicate ally, Al Green, owner of Al Green's nightlife bar, and the McCadden Gang. The McCadden Gang consisted of Bugs and Meyer mob members Lewis and Mary Abrams and Al Green's associate Jack Anderson Wilson, a giant 6'4" strong man who walked with a limp.
Oh, okay.
Bugsy relied on these jewelry heists, selling his real estate holdings and borrowing additional funds to deliver on his promise of opening the Flamingo by Christmas Day. Although the hotel was not fully prepared, Bugsy managed to open it on December 26, 1946, but the turnout was extremely disappointing. In just the first 10 days, Bugsy suffered a $300,000 loss and faced a worsening financial crisis. He decided
you don't lose the mob's money.
No, you don't.
He decided to close. Go ahead, Shelley.
Somebody about to get whacked.
Well, he decided to close the hotel in the first week of January 1947, and FBI records indicate that he returned to the Los Angeles area, displaying very irrational behavior. Elizabeth Short returned to Los Angeles in the midst of this gang war that is happening in July of 1946, unaware of that war that's going on. She also had frequented the Al Green's night spot that we talked about, which was the hub for the jewelry thieves, orchestrated by Bugsy to gather more money for his Las Vegas venture. When her mutilated body was found in Leimert Park, Captain Donahoe did not disclose that her remains were discovered less than 800 yards from Jack Dragna's backyard. What was more curious is that Mr. Johnson, the man who witnessed the sedan while unloading the clippings, his house was 6 blocks east of the murder site. Jack Dragna's house was only 3 blocks east. So what did he have to say during the police house-to-house investigation? In all the newspaper coverage, memos, and paperwork, there's not a single mention of Jack Dragna and what he may have saw, witnessed, heard, or that he was even interviewed.
Or perpetrated. Sorry, had to throw that in.
Nor was it ever mentioned about the murder site and the proximity to such a notorious mafia member. Also, the fact that the letter D was carved into Elizabeth Short's pubic area with a knife was never mentioned. Now, official photos of the crime scene show this visible carving. The carved D raised questions about whether it was referring to Dahlia or Dragna. A police memo mentions that some people believe the D cut on Elizabeth Short's body was similar to one found on Jean French's body with the red lipstick murder, the writing of BD. Mm-hmm. But handwriting experts stated that it was impossible to determine any handwriting characteristics from the D cut into Elizabeth Short's pubic region.
Right.
Struggling for money, Bugsy was desperate. And on January 16th, the day after Short's body was discovered, a newspaper article mentioned an ongoing investigation of the robbery of the Macombo nightclub in which certain jewelry was taken. Now, FBI files confirmed that Bugsy was in the area in early January 1947, and his bodyguard returned to Las Vegas shortly after the Macombo heist, carrying jewelry that matched the description of the stolen items. These files also revealed that on the day that Elizabeth Short's body was found, Bugsy suddenly made plans to extend his stay in Los Angeles for 10 days in a secluded bungalow, similar to the one owned by Brenda Allen. June 20th, 1947, Bugsy Siegel is assassinated. He had become mentally disturbed and an unstable problem for the organized crime syndicate, as well as skimming profits for the fledgling Flamingo Hotel. Go ahead, Ryan.
I'd always heard that it was his girlfriend's place he was staying at, and she was out of town.
Well, I found that he was at I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. There's an FBI file that actually says secluded bungalow.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I got that from.
Okay.
Was that he extended his stay just during this time. Now, he may have been living, at his girlfriend's house, stuff like that, but during this time, particularly in early January 1947, he's staying in this bungalow.
Right. Okay.
So, according to an alleged confession from a bodyguard on his deathbed and an interview with Lucky Luciano in 1973, it was Jack Dragna who planned and executed the assassination of Bugsy, allegedly. The reason for this may have been because Bugsy had the means and opportunity to be involved in the murder of Elizabeth Short. Bugsy was known to be violent, frequently using a pistol to assault others, matching many of the cuts, bruises, and trauma on Short's face. It is possible that he was the one who attacked her, slashed her mouth, and then discarded her body near Dragna's backyard. If this is true, though, what would have been his motive? Donald Wolfe, the author of the Black Dahlia Files, claims to have been equated with a man named Arthur James. Not to be confused with Arthur Lake. Now we got Arthur James.
Okay.
Arthur James had connections to Mark Hansen, who owned and managed Florentine Gardens. According to Arthur James, he knew Elizabeth and tried to arrange for her to stay in one of Hansen's many rooming houses near Hollywood Boulevard and Van Ness. Arthur James mentions losing contact with Elizabeth after she suddenly left town in 1944 until she returned in the summer of 1946 and stayed at Hansen's residence on Carlos Avenue. James also reveals that during the war, Hansen would recruit attractive girls to work at the Florentine Gardens and his other dance halls downtown in order to entertain the servicemen and ensure that they spent all their money during their time off. According to James, Hansen allowed certain girls with, quote, special qualities to stay at his home on Carlos Avenue and reserved them for special clients within the Hollywood crowd. James alleged that a, quote, big shot became infatuated with Elizabeth and got her pregnant. Hansen attempted to arrange an abortion for her, but she fled to San Diego before the appointment. The last time James saw Elizabeth was a few days before she left the city in 1946, and he didn't see her again until her picture appeared in the newspaper as the victim. James also heard rumors that this big shot involved was Norman Chandler, the heir to the Chandler dynasty. According to Donald Wolfe, this revelation fits into various aspects of the Black Dahlia case. If Elizabeth was indeed pregnant at the time she was murdered, it would completely change the understanding of the crime, including the motive, the MO, and the suspects. It raises the possibility that the wealthy heir to the Chandler dynasty may have been the big shot who showed interest in the Black Dahlia and may have fathered her child. Vince Carter, the administrative vice officer, he reveals that within the higher ranks of the LAPD, it was widely known that Norman Chandler was a womanizer who kept his personal life away from public exposure. Despite his immense influence in the city's political, business, and social spheres, Chandler preferred to maintain a private existence. However, Vince Carter discloses that the intelligence units within the LAPD were well acquainted with Norman Chandler and actively sought to uncover every detail about his the influential mogul and the heir to the Chandler dynasty. Vince Carter said, quote, "Contrary to popular opinion, there is no honor among thieves, and the upper echelons of the LAPD made a deliberate effort to know a great deal about Norman's private life, and they knew more than he was ever made aware of." Ray Pinker, who's the LAPD forensic chemist, was ahead of his time in the field of electronic surveillance as well. In 1942, he and Chief Harrell were indicted for offering the gangster squad to place electronic surveillance in various important offices of City Hall, including the mayor's office. Private Detective Fred Otash stated that this surveillance also involved Norman Chandler. Now, according to Otash, Chief Harrell wanted to gather information about Norman Chandler's actions as he was aware of Norman's womanizing and extravagant lifestyle. Norman Chandler was married to a woman named Dorothy, which was an arrangement by his father, but allegedly their marriage was troubled, with Norman frequently spending his time at the California Club, which is very close to the Biltmore Hotel, while Dorothy stayed in a penthouse she had created in the Los Angeles Times building. Now, the California Club, downtown Los Angeles, it was founded by Norman's father, Harry Chandler, and it had a private rear entrance just behind the Biltmore Hotel on Hope Street. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Fred Otash, the former LAPD officer Fred Otash, was stationed at the California Club, where he monitored the activities of influential residents and people in power for Ray Pinker and the Gangster Squad. Otash claimed that Norman Chandler would meet women brought by his actor friend Arthur Lake in his suite of the California Club. Arthur Lake and Norman Chandler were close friends, with Norman even serving as Lake's best man at his wedding. Arthur Lake and Elizabeth Short first crossed paths in 1944 at the Hollywood Canteen. Both of their names were found in the Bauerdorf diary, and Lake admitted to knowing Short when questioned by the Sheriff's Department. If Arthur James' claims were true that Elizabeth was pregnant with Norman Chandler's child at the time of her murder, it could explain the extraordinary efforts by the Chandler faction at City Hall to conceal the true circumstances of the heinous crime. Go ahead, Ryan.
So do you think that the whole placing of her body near Dragna's back door with the D carved into it, knowing that there's a gang war going on between Dragna and Bugsy Siegel, was also another elaborate red herring by the Chandler family?
Very well could be. Shelly's over here like,
yeah. If I tell you my theory right now, it's going to blow your rest of your story. So go ahead. I'm going to shut up.
Well, in later years, Donald Wolfe had the opportunity to conduct an exclusive interview with my favorite character, Aggie Underwood, where she mentioned the promotion she had received, but only realized the reason behind it years later. The reason was related to Arthur Lake. Aggie revealed that she had been informed by contacts in the Sheriff's Department that both Arthur Lake and Elizabeth were mentioned in the diary of the Bauerdorf girl. Arthur Lake had also been brought in for questioning on that case as well, the Bauerdorf case. Aggie discovered that Arthur Lake's phone number was found in Elizabeth's address book after the Black Dahlia murder and the mailing in of the contents. She was also aware that Arthur Lake had married Patricia Van Cleve, who was believed to be Marion Davies' niece. However, it was later revealed to Aggie that Patricia was actually the illegitimate daughter of Marion Davies and William Randolph Hearst. Allegedly. Hearst didn't want any coverage involving Arthur Lake to be reported in the papers to protect his children and grandchildren from the affair. So he controlled the media coverage, and the boss killed the Bauerdorf, Lake, and Black Dahlia connection story. Despite being removed from the case, Aggie continued to follow the Dahlia investigation over the years and also concluded in this later interview that City Hall had control over and covered up the case. In addition, Aggie indirectly confirmed to Donald Wolfe that the issue of the control question in Elizabeth's autopsy was allegedly due to her pregnancy. And she further shared information about a crazy underworld abortionist who was involved, and how Detective Hansen had brought him in for questioning multiple times, but Chief Harrell prevented any indictment. And mysteriously, when it got close to indictment, the doctor suddenly died at his home. However, there was another mysterious and unsolved case that would make headlines, which would be the disappearance of Jean Spangler. And these similarities were eerie. Jean, a stunning 27-year-old brunette, had also worked as one of Mark Hansen's girls at the Florentine Gardens. She went to great lengths to meet influential people and be seen in popular places. She eventually became involved with Mickey Cohen, an associate of Bugsy, and he would accompany her to various Hollywood night spots. After joining the Extras Guild and securing acting roles, Jean also enjoyed the nightlife in the company of men. There were rumors of her actually dating Kirk Douglas, which she never confirmed. But on October 7th, 1949, Jean vanished without a trace. 2 days later, her purse was discovered at Griffith Park with a broken strap. Inside was a note allegedly written by Jean to Kirk mentioning a visit to a Dr. Scott while her mother was away. However, Kirk and his lawyer denied any connections to Jean, while her mother insisted that Kirk had been with her daughter on 2 separate occasions. Friends revealed that Jean was 3 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance and believed she was heading for an appointment with a Hollywood abortionist named Dr. Scott. Some speculate that Dr. Scott may have botched the procedure, leading to Jean's death and the disposal of her body, possibly in Griffith Park. However, this theory doesn't explain the broken purse straps. In the week prior to her disappearance, Jean was seen in Palm Springs where Kirk Douglas was allegedly vacationing. Witnesses spotted her at a resort with David, quote, Little Davy. I like that, Little Davy.
Lobster.
Yeah, right. Little Davy Ogle. How you doing? Another associate of Mickey Cohen, who also vanished 2 days after Jean. Police discovered that Jean had met someone near her apartment on the evening of October 6th and gotten into a sedan. On the night she disappeared, she was arguing with 2 unidentified men at the Cheesebox restaurant before leaving with them, which was confirmed by the restaurant's owner. 2 rumors persist regarding Jean Spangler's disappearance. One suggests that Kirk Douglas had a romantic relationship with Jean, resulting in her pregnancy. When she sought an abortion from Dr. Scott, the procedure went wrong, causing her death and disposal of her body. The second rumor is that claims that Mickey Cohen, upon learning about Jean's pregnancy, sent Little Davy to extort money from Kirk in Palm Springs. When Kirk's agent heard about the situation, he informed Johnny Rosselli, who was close to Harry Cohn, the president of Columbia Pictures. Johnny Rosselli discussed the matter with Jack Dragna, and the problem was swiftly resolved. Jean Spangler and Little Davy were never seen or heard from again. Now, in 1949, with all of this taking place, while all this is happening, the 1949 grand jury is also looking into these unsolved crimes in Los Angeles and the connections between the underworld and the LAPD. However, Chief Harrell, y'all like my sigh, y'all know something good's coming. Chief Harrell, Assistant Chief Joe Reed, and Gangster Squad Captain Willie Burns attempted to sabotage the upcoming investigation by claiming they had apprehended the psychotic killer of Elizabeth Short. This news was released on January 11th, 1949, with the headline stating, quote, Suspect in Dahlia case reveals new secrets of killing. And it says, best suspect yet held in Dahlia, slaying of Black Dahlia. On January 10th, 1949, we're now 2 years after her murder. Leslie Dillon, a 28-year-old hotel bellhop, was arrested on suspicion of murdering Elizabeth Short. Chief Harrell confidently declared that Dillon was the strongest suspect the case had ever seen. Dr. Paul DeRiver, a psychiatrist hired by Chief Harrell, labeled Dillon as a psychopath who possessed more knowledge about the Black Dahlia murder than both the police and most psychiatrists. The subsequent events became one of the most peculiar developments in the Black Dahlia case. Despite not being a police officer, DeRiver wielded considerable influence within the department and played a significant role in falsely accusing Leslie Dillon, which eventually became known as the Dillon catastrophe. The circumstances leading to Dillon's arrest began with a letter he wrote to DeRiver. As an inspiring mystery writer who had previously lived in Los Angeles and currently resided in Florida, Dillon expressed his interest in the Black Dahlia case. He mentioned that his friend Jeff Connors had met Elizabeth Short at a bar in Hollywood and might be of assistance to the police. Well, intrigued by Dillon's analysis of the case in the letter, Dr. DeRiver contacted him and offered to discuss the matter further. Former homicide detective Sergeant Stephen Bailey, who was working on the Dahlia case, later revealed that there was pressure within the LAPD to divert the investigation from being pursued, because the grand jury is on it like hotcakes at this point. Like, they about to just go through it. Well, DeRiver's involvement with Dillon coincided with that investigation, adding to the urgency to resolve it. Upon hearing Dillon's letter, Chief Harrell, along with Assistant Chief Joe Reed and Gangster Squad member Willie Burns, devised a plan to arrest Dillon. They lured him to California, where they hoped to obtain a false confession of the Black Dahlia murder. In multiple phone calls, DeRiver provided Dillon with detailed information of the crime scene, the autopsy findings, and the mindset of the killer while discussing the case further. He even shared facts about the murder that only the perpetrator would know. After some conversation, DeRiver expressed interest in hiring Dillon as an assistant at the LAPD and collaborating on a book about the Dahlia case. He arranged to meet Dillon in Las Vegas, and they traveled to Los Angeles together in an unmarked police limousine driven by Lieutenant Burns. During the journey, DeRiver continued the conversation, delving into Dillon's theories and knowledge of the case. But suddenly, the conversation took a striking turn. He suggested that Dillon might be talking about himself when discussing his friend Jeff Connors' connection to Elizabeth Short. When they pulled over to a motel without warning, Lieutenant Willie Burns handcuffed him, marking the beginning of an extraordinary ordeal. And Dillon said, quote, "The conversation right away became more and more psychological on his part. When we got to the town of Banning, stopped in a motel, the doctor told me out of the clear sky that he believed I had murdered Elizabeth Short." Hold on, I got to take a drink. Unable to locate Jeff Connors, DeRiver concluded that Connors was an aberration, a schizoid extension of Dillon's self. Dillon was taken to the Strand Hotel in Los Angeles by officers Archie Case and James Ahern, where he underwent a week-long interrogation. Dillon said, I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't make a phone call to my wife or try to find a lawyer or anyone to help me. They just kept questioning me. They wouldn't stop. They made me take all of my clothes off, took photographs of me, stripped me naked. While they had me handcuffed to a radiator, they kept on with the questioning, and they really got nasty about it. They used tactics to convince Dillon that he had repressed memories of committing the crime and that confession was his only way out of madness. Archie Case and James Ahern had told him they'd been tracking him for 2 years and could blow away any alibi. And Leslie Dillon said, DeRiver wanted me to confess that I'd killed the Dahlia, and I couldn't confess to it, but they had me just about convinced I was crazy or something, and that maybe I actually did kill the Dahlia, and then just forgot about it. Well, close to the breaking point and in desperation, Dillon managed to write a note on a postcard addressed to attorney Jerry Geisler and dropped it outside the window of the motel. It read, quote, I am being held in room 219 and 21, Strand Hotel, in connection with the Black Dahlia murder by Dr. J.P. DeRiver, as far as I can tell. I would like legal counsel. Signed, Leslie Dillon. The next day, Dillon was taken to Central and was told he was being booked for the murder of Elizabeth Short. And Leslie Dillon said, quote, it went on for about 10 hours. I was losing track of what was happening. I kept insisting I hadn't killed her, but the doctor tried again and again to convince me that I was blocking out the truth and that it was necessary for me to confess the truth and be free of the troubles I was feeling. It was like a nightmare. The day after he was booked, someone found that note card and forwarded it to Jerry Geisler's office. Dillon's mother, who was then contacted by one of Geisler's attorneys, retained Geisler to file a writ of habeas corpus on his behalf. And of course, that's where the case against Dillon fell apart. Witnesses placed Dillon in San Francisco at the time of the murder, and employment records confirmed his alibi. It was determined that Dillon had only moved to Los Angeles after the murder took place. Jeff Connors' existence was also corroborated, and Jeff confirmed meeting Elizabeth Short at a Hollywood bar. Knowing they lacked sufficient evidence to hold Dillon, the habeas corpus writ on the way, the district attorney's office quietly admitted their failure and stated, we got insufficient evidence to hold our hot suspect. So they let him go. Well,
I like that hostage Floridian slip you just
right?
Yeah.
Well, Chief Harrell and Dr. DeRiver tried to avoid the scrutiny by staying out of the public eye until the Dillon catastrophe went away. However, City Councilman Ernest Debs called for an inquiry into Dillon's false arrest, accusing Harrell of mishandling the case and DeRiver of being a con artist. It was discovered that DeRiver had fabricated his credentials and was subsequently indicted for forging narcotics prescriptions. He resigned from the LAPD, obviously. On January 22nd, 1949, Leslie Dillon was released from custody, though he remained shaken by his harrowing experience. But with Dillon's release, the Black Dahlia case was put back on the grand jury's agenda, scheduled for the final investigation of the 1949 session. However, the disinformation and obstacles laid out in 1947 made the investigation challenging for grand jury investigator Frank B. Jimison and the impaneled jury. And that is where we're going to pick up for next week for part 3 in the series finale of the Black Dahlia episodes. With all suspects cleared and the case getting even colder, the grand jury and Frank Jimison re-examines all evidence. New witness testimony is brought to light. The LAPD cracks down on the mob-run city and takes into custody one of the highest-profiled vice queens. What is found within are the tiny details that, when pieced together, make an extremely compelling theory on who could have killed Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia.
I got an idea, but I'm next week.
And now let me go to the comments where they're all like, cliffhanger. No, just kidding.
I don't know, man. It sounds to me like they're trying anything they can to get to stick, just throwing it at the wall in order to knock this case off the rails.
I'm telling you, the rabbit hole I ran down for this flipping story. It's like coming across another one where it's like Donahoe's like, oh, it's a female killer. Oh, she's got lesbian tendencies. Oh, she's got small genitalia, can't have sex with men, has to have sex with women. Like all of this. I'm like turning the pages. I'm like, what the hell? And then of course I got to go track all this crap down. But when you jump from these itty bitty little pieces where it's like, why I'm having to tell y'all the foundation pieces of, okay, what's happening between Jack Dragna and Bugsy Siegel? What's happening with the corruption in LAPD, starting with Mayor Frank Shaw in 1933, you know, when it all comes together and the theory is laid out before you, which I'm going to do. I'm going to walk you through the entire theory of what happened to Elizabeth Short. When you look back on everything I told you, you're going to be like, son of a bitch. Holy hell. I mean, it's the tiniest detail that just drops into place. And you're like, that makes sense now. Got it. That's why all these murders are being brought up, you know, these unsolved crimes. And my favorite character, Aggie Underwood. God love her, man.
Man, I don't know. I'm gonna stick with my theory that I came up with a while ago. Who better to frame than the gangsters in the city having a gang war right in the middle of everything going on, and placing the body somewhere close to one of those gangsters with his initial carved into the pubic bone. I mean, and
you just gonna throw your theory out there right now, hello?
I mean, that's where I'm going so far.
Because I so want to argue with you right now, but you know,
I know you do. I'm saying that's where I'm going to go so far. That doesn't mean it can't change next week, but from what I understand and from the way I see everything,
y'all go for it. Go for it.
No. I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna hold all my verdicts until you finish up next week, and then, child, it's going gloves off.
I'm just saying for right now, it could change next week because I don't have all the information in front of me just yet. But from where we have gone in this particular episode, that's where I'm kind of leaning towards. I'm kind of leaning towards we're framing the mafia because, like you said, Bugsy Siegel was known to have violent tendencies. I don't know if you know this or not, but Bugsy is his nickname because Bugsy means crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's...
Yeah, it's Benjamin is his name. Yeah. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel,
That's what he was known as because bugs at the time meant like you were fucking nuts.
Yeah. Bugging out.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you have a violent gangster that you can frame. You have a gang war that is happening between two major gangsters in the city. You have a body dropped off close to that one of the gangsters' homes, and then you also have that gangster that you could be framing is assassinated in said gang war, so he's not here to defend himself. I
So
think that's
help
what
me
I'm.
God, you go a
Mhm.
little column A, little column B, and you're going to sleep with the fishes.
I just have to say though, because we all know Shelly. It was just put in the comments. Shelly is having to hold back for 3 whole weeks. Y'all better watch out next week.
So as of right now, I'm saying that's where I'm going as of right now. Now next week that could completely change, but based on the information that's in front of me at the moment,
stick to it. Pick it and stick to it.
Kiss my ass. I'll do what I want.
No, next week, yes. Next week we are going to be looking into the 1949 grand jury re-investigation into the Black Dahlia case. All that is brought to light during that, what is found out through the grand jury investigator Frank Jemison, as well as hear some of the testimony from higher up underworld vice people. Like I just said, they arrest Brenda Allen. You're going to want to hear it. So,
okay.
I mean,
oh wow! With
I'm
that
excited.
y'all
are gonna see why I kind of hate to love this woman. She's smart. I'm just gonna say that.
Well, with that being said,
Well,
Blake, why don't we wrap this up and you tell them everything they need to know?
Absolutely. Let me wet my whistle just really quick.
Yeah.
I mean, I just delivered an hour and 40 minutes worth of talking. So, well, if you need even more from us, you can watch our brand new talk show After Dark with EVP exclusively on Paraflix Paranormal Plus. Our entire first season is now available on that platform, and we are about to be gearing up to start filming season 2 here in the next couple of weeks. Excuse me. We have 8 episodes consisting of interviews with other individuals in the paranormal field, as well as haunted location owners. We also have paranormal investigations on that season with evidence you won't see anywhere else other than on Paraflix. Paraflix is available on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play. Make sure you use our link that will be posted up on our Facebook page, or through our Linktree link on our Facebook page tomorrow. That is After Dark 25. It is also in the show notes for you audio listeners. That'll get you 25% off an annual subscription to Paraflix Paranormal Plus. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to be posting up our Linktree link, which will include links to everything that we do. That is going to be that link to the Paraflix page and every social media platform we are on, our online merchandise store, our public investigations page, which we do have some confirmed. Sorry, get to the end of the episode and all of a sudden the coughing starts happening. So tickets will be on sale soon for some of our public investigations, so y'all be on watch for that. Make sure that you're following our Eventbrite page to be notified when they go on sale. And that also includes our Patreon page. Our Patreon page is the fastest and easiest way you can directly help support the show. For just $5 a month, you will gain access to over 250 plus Patreon exclusive videos. This support goes directly to the show and the adventures that we get to bring you week after week. This price will never change, and with that, you currently get our pre and post broadcasts, which are the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after the live broadcast, where we discuss things further. Probably going to fight about this after that and act goofy as hell. You also get our special video cast with some of our patrons and our Paracon speaking events. And we are also now going to be releasing some of our raw evidence footage where you can review it with us. So if you've ever wanted to do that, now it's going to be your chance. That is going to only be available through Patreon. We did release a couple of Estes methods a few weeks ago. We're getting ready to throw out, we had to get to the new year and past the holidays, y'all. We're getting ready to throw out more investigation videos, so you can go over and view those as well. Make sure you are following us across all social media platforms, as we are starting to release different pieces of evidence as well as announcements for tickets and investigations to different social media channels. So if you're just following us on one channel, you're only getting a small portion of the story. These are all the ways you can directly support everything Vaguely Paranormal, but we also appreciate your love and support through those likes, comments, shares, views, and downloads. And remember, as always, any questions, comments, stories that you would like to share with us, those can be submitted to us at the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Well, y'all, we want to thank y'all for joining us for another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. For myself, I am Blake Smith, and my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt and Mr. Ryan Roberts. We thank y'all so much for joining us. We will see you next Tuesday.
Bye, y'all.